Thank you very much, Mr. Coviello, for your interesting words. We are not going to have an intermission, so whoever would like to go out and refresh can do it while we are talking. And now it is my great privilege to invite Mr. Jim Jaeger. Jim Jaeger is Vice President, Cybersecurity Services, General Dynamics Fidelis, Cybersecurity Solutions. He's a very special man. He's responsible for managing the network defense and forensic business area at General Dynamics Fidelis Cybersecurity Solutions, including the digital forensic labs. וזה יהיה לנו מאוד מעניין היום לשמוע מה זה להפוך אירוע למשהו פורנזי שמביא אחריו גם את היכולת להביא לידי משפט שיש לו מומחיות גדולה בזה. In his role he has led cyber forensic investigations into some of the largest network breaches impacting industries. Mr. Jaeger has also had leadership role for a wide range of cybersecurity. And one of the things that I learned yesterday, maybe we all have to learn, is that he supported the DoD Cybercrime Center called DC3. It was new to me. I don't know whether it is new to all of you, so it's important to know. He's a former Brigadier General of the United States Air Force, and his military services include stints as Director of Intelligence, J2 for the U.S. Atlantic Command, Assistant Deputy Director of Operations at the National Security Agency. If I will say more, you will have to kill me. So with these words, I'm asking Jim to speak about the financial breach, lessons learned, please. And you have water here, so.
Thank you, Rami. Well, I do really appreciate the invitation to join you that Rami and the National Cyber Bureau extended. It's kind of a follow-up, in fact, to a visit by several members of the National Cyber Bureau to our forensics lab in Maryland that Rami just mentioned. Frankly, I've been here since Saturday, and it's starting to feel like old home week because I've seen many of you over the last couple of days, thanks to the busy agenda that the National Cyber Bureau and my friends at El Ul have put together. But very, very substantive visits with the National Bank of Israel and others, and some of your really up-and-coming technology companies. There are a number of things that I want to just briefly provide perspective on before I launch into the presentation. First of all, this is a presentation that I gave at the FS-ISAC Summit about a month ago. That presentation was an hour long. You're going to get it in 20 minutes, so you're going to have to listen fast. I've tried to cut a few things out, but there's just so much good substance here. I think what you're going to see is, as Rami mentioned, we do forensic investigations both for the Department of Defense and commercially, and we do many of the largest breach investigations in the U.S. every year. So what I'm going to try and convey are some fairly hands-on lessons learned. Many of the things that I'm going to mention are not new. Defense in depth, as Art Coviello just mentioned, the critical importance of monitoring. Again, nothing new, but hopefully when you put it into the context of some very painful breaches and some very painful lessons learned, it will make some of these real to you. So let me just jump right in with that. This morning, Art Coviello provided guidance to the Board of Directors in his initial presentation. I think the really good news that we're seeing in the last 2 years or so is that boards of directors and general counsels now within a wide range of in particular commercial organizations, are really starting to take cybersecurity seriously. This study says that 48% of board members now rate data security as their #1 concern, and 55% of the general counsels in corporations now rate data security as their #1 concern. That hopefully will change the environment over time, in particular for the CIOs and the CISOs to start getting the resources that they need when you see that kind of concern. Okay, I'm going to move into a couple of breaches. Unfortunately, so many of the big hacks that we investigate, there's a lot of lawsuits involved with them. So in most cases, I can't identify the victim, but I'm going to talk kind of generically about multiple breaches and the lessons that we learned from them. This is an area for financial institutions that has been mentioned a couple of times today, and I think Director General Callow mentioned the ATM cash outs for $10 million typically, $40 million recently with some banks in the Persian Gulf. The sad thing here, and here's where information sharing becomes so critical. We investigated the first one of these breaches about 4 years ago. We've investigated another one this past year, and yet they keep on occurring. I won't go through the details again of how they raised the limits within the database on the value of each card, on the number of withdrawals that they could do in a day, and the amount that they could get with each withdrawal. What was really significant with the first one was that they actually essentially hacked into the HSMs that generate the encrypted PIN numbers, and this was the first ever successful attack on an HSM. One of the things that we really believe in, again, is working with the regulatory organizations like the Bank of Israel. Within 36 hours of us discovering how they got the PIN numbers, we were briefing a number of federal regulators in the U.S. as well as in Europe to make sure that the vulnerability was not allowed to exist or happen again. This case, the first case, again, involved RBS WorldPay, Royal Bank of Scotland, but the U.S. Subsidiary. Also illustrates the importance of information sharing. Frankly, our law enforcement in the U.S. has kind of gone through a sea change. The FBI used to kind of hold things close to the chest. They wanted us to give them the information, but we didn't get a lot back. That changed with this case. And the director of the FBI Cyber Division now cites this case as the model for information sharing between law enforcement and commercial forensics firms. We readily admit that we probably wouldn't have found that vulnerability in the PIN encryption process with the HSMs if the FBI hadn't told us that there was a group that was focusing on HSMs. They also admit that they would not have gotten arrests in Russia. This was the first time we were able to get actual arrests in Russia for cyber crime attacks in the U.S., that they wouldn't have gotten those arrests without all of the evidence that we provided them. So a number of lessons learned out of that case. One of the things that I do these lessons learned presentations fairly often because, again, I think it's really important that we share this kind of information. One of them that I think is valuable for financial organizations as well as other firms is to understand what the attack vectors are. This is last year 2012, and these are the successful attack vectors in the breaches that we investigated. The first one, unfortunately, is really, really sad, and that's SQL injection against websites. Known vulnerabilities, published patches to fix them that weren't implemented. And in 30 cases of these breaches, including some big financial breaches, they got in via SQL attacks on websites that should have been prevented. That's the sad part there. I'll talk very, very quickly, and again, ask me questions while I'm on these slides, because a couple of them are going to get a little technical. Two types of advanced attacks that we first started seeing in 2010 that are designed to evade typical signature-based defenses that, again, you've heard a number of times today that you just cannot depend on signature-based defenses. Insiders, in particular in the financial industry, I think you probably are more aware and pay more attention to insiders than most of the other industries. Spear phishing. This is the one that's come up 5 to 10% a year for the last 3 years. And in particular, we see in large financial institutions and in defense organizations where the cyber defenses and the tools have been built up to a fairly high level. Spear phishing is the way they're getting in almost every case. The good news, if there is good news, is the last one. Wireless attacks on wireless systems were 25% 3 years ago. They've gone down to 15, and now they're down to 5%. The word got out on securing wireless systems. Yes, please.
And also another question that I have, wireless you mean on the mobile aspect or
yes.
BYOD?
It's less BYOD. We're seeing the malware start to develop for BYOD, but that's the attack phase that's coming. These are fixed wireless systems, distribution systems in warehouses, shopping centers, that kind of thing. I'm sorry, I missed it. Oh, I didn't add up. Somebody pointed that out once, and the slide got away. I could give it to you, but I'm going to keep moving fast. But good catch, obviously. The math, okay. The math should add up. You're right. Let me just very briefly touch on the two advanced attacks that we're seeing. The first one is antivirus evasion. Again, most antivirus systems today are signature-based, either based on a string of code or a hash value. We are seeing attacks where they're using compression techniques to compress the malware. That changes both the code strings and the hash values. You get the malware in, decompress it, and now you've got active malware. Typically, there are probably 150 different compression tools available, most of them as freeware today on the internet. So it's very, very easy for hackers to download a compression tool, pack their malware, and get it into your network past the antivirus systems today doing that. The other technique that we're seeing is firewall evasion. This one, fortunately, is relatively rare, but there's a number of protocols that people routinely let through firewalls, like ICMP. It's essentially needed for computers to talk to each other. We didn't used to worry about ICMP because the packets were very, very small and couldn't carry much of a payload. We've seen a couple of cases now where the hackers have put counters in the ICMP packets, so they put in just a little bit of payload, a little bit of payload, a little bit of payload, using the counters to reassemble the ICMP packets and get their payload in that way. Fortunately, that one we're less worried about than compression, because we don't see a lot of hackers using it. Okay, this one again just emphasizes, this is a study by Surveillance, and it really goes to exactly the heart of what Art Coviello was just saying, is that monitoring is absolutely critical. Too many organizations are putting too much faith in kind of single trick tools like malware detection tools. First of all, only 30 to 50% of the attacks are via malware. So, you know, you can't just rely on some of those hot new tools. You've got to be monitoring what's inside the network. The one place that I'll disagree with Art just a little bit, he's absolutely right. The perimeters are becoming more porous, but continuous monitoring has been critical for the last 25 years. I mean, we stood up the Air Force CERT in the U.S. 24 years ago, and the total function of the CERT was to do monitoring. And we've always said there is no network today that a determined hacker is not going to get into. So you have got to be monitoring. You've got to have eyes on that network so you can catch them pretty quickly when they get in. I want to show you what happens if you don't detect incidents quickly. So this is an attack on a financial institution. Unfortunately, I can't identify it. This attack, though, was classic. Again, SQL injection against a vulnerability on a website. The attack went on, the breach went on for more than a year because the monitoring mechanism was not adequate. Here's the danger, though. You see that the intruder, top left, gains access in January. Amazingly, they were so confident of their access, they didn't even bother to install backdoors until March, because they were so confident they could get back in. What they did do, though, is they immediately, in early February, installed RAM scrapers. They started looking at the processes running on servers, essentially in memory. They were going after credit cards in a process where the cards were fully encrypted. The only time they were unencrypted was for just a brief second in memory, where they were decrypted to process and then re-encrypted again. So they put RAM scrapers into the network to look for those processes, and then you see in June and again in December, they developed tailored malware for the specific processes of this company, and fairly unique processes that. But that's the problem. If you allow them to remain in your network, they will tailor what they're doing so that ultimately in mid-December and then again in mid-January, you see them get to essentially what we called operational or production collection systems to take credit card data out of the network. Very sophisticated, as you might understand with RAM scrapers. They're operating on the server, operating on the same memory that the server's operating on. If they start taking too much, they're going to impact the server, the performance of the servers. So they had to tune their RAM scrapers to get about 10 to 20% of the cards or transactions, so that they weren't impacting performance. I could go into further detail, but the tailoring of this malware for the specific victim is amazing. Okay, Art talked about data sharing and threat intelligence. I wanted to take that just a quick step lower. Typically, the data sharing that most of us see goes on at the top level, at the first two bullets. We share bad URLs, malicious URLs. We share malicious IPs that the hackers are using, and probably a little bit of information about the kind of activity associated with those IPs, the malware, or the URL. What's really important here are the bullets in black. We need to do a lot more sharing about the significance of that information. What happens to your network when someone visits one of these malicious websites? What kind of malware is coming with it? What does it do? What are the attackers after? And how are they getting it out of the network? The real key, again, as Art indicated, it's not the top line, which is data, it's the bottom line, which is knowledge. What do I do about these malicious IPs? What do I do about those URLs? Okay, another example, frankly, of information or sharing or threat intelligence. This was the Shamoun attack on Saudi Aramco. Wiped 30,000 computers over essentially a 3-day holiday weekend. We did not work that breach, but we did get a hold of the malware, reverse engineered it, developed a technique to actually recover some of the information on the hard drives. Frankly, we could have sat on that, and we knew there were going to be more wiping attacks. We could have used that to position to get the work on future wiping attacks. We didn't think that's the right thing to do. We published it on our website that said, if you get hit by a variant of Shamoun, here's what you can do to recover some of those hard drives. That, frankly, paid off about a month ago when the Dark Soul virus hit the Korean banks. We were able to get that malware. It actually is different malware. Dark Soul is not a variant of Shamoun, although it does the same. It does a wiping attack. In this case, we were able to, within 1 hour, we developed a technique to totally recover all of the information on those hard drives. And again, we published it on our website. We just believe that information sharing is that important. I know we're pressing time. The only thing I would like to say is that while we do traditional network security assessments, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, what we're finding is more and more the senior leadership, whether it's the FBI director, whether it's General Keith Alexander at Cyber Command, what they're really pointing out is that there's an awful lot of organizations that have been penetrated and don't even know it. And so what we're starting to get requests for are breach indicator assessments. We take a look at the monitoring systems and the sensors on a network, analyze the strengths and limitations, then we'll bring in some other sensors that give you a different look at your network. We'll spend about 2 weeks with those unique sensors and our forensic examiners that have been doing these breach investigations, and we give organizations a look at either clean bill of health. No, you don't have anything going on in your network. That's pretty rare, but ideally that's the goal. In many cases, we find indications of previous breaches, or we find a fair amount of malware that's there just waiting to be activated. Okay, I'm actually going to skip past the Oh, I get 2 minutes yet? Ooh, good. Well, this one in particular is, we're finding is relevant to the financial industry. We're starting to get polls, and it somewhat relates to the big data area, again, that Art talked about. But we're getting, taking that kind of a level down, we're getting requests from banks, in particular, ironically, Canadian banks. I'm not sure why, but that's where we're getting the pull from, for multi-dimensional risk management solutions. We've always worked the cyber risk management arena. Now the banks are telling us they want, in a single big data system, a risk management capability that not only looks at cyber, but looks at money laundering and looks at fraud, and does that all within a cohesive framework and a cohesive organization. So we're definitely working on some test beds in that arena. And frankly, we're not the only ones. We know that there are a couple of other firms working those as well. Okay, I know that was a little high speed. Again, I really like to do this kind of lessons learned and do it in many cases in an environment where I can do a lot more give and take. So I'm available because between the National Cyber Bureau and Elul, they've absolutely worked me to death on this trip. We finish at 8 or 9 o'clock every night. I've had no chance to do any sightseeing, so I will readily take invitations. I will readily take invitations to come back and do more in-depth discussions in these areas. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim.